How's your mam and them? Hope everybody's doing good on this Monday. Been a busy Monday for me, so I wasn't able to get here earlier today. And hopefully this week goes by smooth because we got a hurricane bearing down on Louisiana currently for the middle of the week. So hopefully that goes smooth and y'all see me throughout the week. Shout out you, Anthony Sanchez. Salute to you. Most people will probably be catching me in the archive around this time. But if you're out there, if you're coming into stumbling in, make sure to leave that comment and hit that like button. Look down there. I'm telling you right now. Look, I don't ask for the money. Got the money. We're good. We're good there. We just do this for the fun. We're just good-natured, concerned citizen who does a YouTube boxing channel and does a couple lives a week to express my concerns, and then at the same time rejoice when something good happens. So you see it down there. No Cash App, no Venmo, no OnlyFans account, because dudes are doing that now. And some of these dudes have triple X in their OnlyFans account too, and they're promoting it to other dudes. But no need to leave a super chat. I'm not tap dancing and copy and pasting press releases for credentials. You see that a lot in the American writer sphere. And just hit the like. That's all you got to do. Hit the like. We're all friends here. Sometimes we're gonna disagree respectfully. And we do and we move on. It's what we do, right? We don't disrespect each other. I'm not going to tell somebody who has a different opinion, because we'll definitely have differing opinions this week, right? Because as you know, not buying the Canelo Berlanga fight, but some of you are, and to each his own. If you want to buy the fight, go buy the fight and have fun, man. Like some dudes, everybody's got different scenario playing out. Some people, they want to chill out on their Saturday night, have a bunch of people over, put some stuff on the grill, and invite the abuela over, and we all just have a good time. Your cousins, your friends, your brother, whatever, and just have a good time and enjoy the fight. And enjoy, especially if you're a Mexican dude, enjoy a Mexican dude beating up on a Puerto Rican dude. It's like, some people, it's for some people, and some people it's not. And to each his own. And I'm not going to tell you to not do it. It's subjective, whether you like a card or not. Everybody has their own opinions. And I respect that, right? I respect that. And we should all respect each other's opinions around these parts. And we'll talk more about that. Shout out my guy Nando, who's a hardworking man out there, out in the air conditioning. He's in the air conditioning. He's watching the other workers work with their hard hats on, and he's directing them. Every once in a while, he'll go out in the heat, but not for too long, maybe 5 minutes, and then he'll go back in and listen to some podcasts. Mars Boxeo, Jesus M, and OnlyFans, and I'm gone. Don't worry, I won't do an OnlyFans. One of the only level-headed channels out there. Respect, I appreciate you, and we're all same level here. We're all friends. We're all same level. If you ever catch me talking down to anybody who doesn't come at me disrespectfully first, then that's when you need to leave, because that's a red flag. Just don't talk down to the audience. Don't talk down to your audience. Don't talk down to a consumer, to someone who will potentially buy from you or read your work or watch your channel. Don't talk down. Like it's just not good strategically. By the way, did y'all see right now? Yours truly is not only in high definition 720. I'm in full high definition 1080p. Did y'all notice that? My teeth look better. My teeth look a little better. You can see the gray a little better, I think. Probably see the gray a little better. That's the downfall. You can see the gray a little better, but look at those teeth. Look at that. Spent a lot of money on that. Teeth look good, right? I feel like the full high definition is working for me. I just feel. Do y'all notice it though? Full high definition today. So hopefully it works out for everybody. I love debate. Shit is boring when everybody agrees. True. We don't like being in an echo chamber. We like disagreeing, but respectfully disagreeing and not trying to shut other people down. Who are voicing their opinion, especially if you're a boxing fan who is just, if you're not buying something, you have the right to tell the people who are trying to sell it to you why you're not buying it. Constructive criticism. And if they chronically do not give it to you, then you voice your opinion a little louder because you're here for an art form. Boxing is an art form. It's not a business. Business is part of it. It's part of this whole sphere, the scenario, but we're here for the art form. That's why we fell in love with boxing. We did not come to boxing for business because, like I've said, this is the last place you would come to try to find a model of good business. This is just bad business all around in American boxing, and the people, the power brokers in America, and the people who write and talk about business and boxing the most seem to not understand business, it looks like to me. And more on that as well. So that's not why we came here. We came here for the art form. Boxing is an art form, and the art of boxing can never die, but they're destroying it here in America to make people not even care about the art form anymore because the business is so bad. Tony Boswell, salute Calix in the chat, stopped in the show, support and hit the like button, working and listening. Another hardworking man. Another hardworking man out there. I don't think Tony's like Nando though. I think Tony's out in the heat doing the actual work, getting his hands calloused. I think that's Tony. But like me, I'm building my own house with my bare hands. You see the calluses there in the 1080p. That's full high definition. Calluses right there. $20 pay-per-views. I just might hold hands with Turkey. All right. He's going to hold hands with Turkey. I can't believe I'm about a pay-per-view headline by Shakur. Damn you, Turkey. So we got one dude who likes Turkey and wants to hold Turkey's hands. We got another dude who's not happy with Turkey and doesn't want to hold hands with Turkey. And this is what you get here. We're not an echo chamber. We're not an echo chamber. So let's start off with this. Shout out Adam's Boxing Show because I like them because they're like us. They're just good-natured boxing fans. And we may not agree, disagree, because none of us ever do, right? None of us are ever going to agree, disagree with everything, right? So I like them because they just give their opinion from the standpoint of a boxing fan. And the reason I like that is because it's a lost art, because it's almost now like people want to separate themselves from boxing fans. And like, you guys stay down there. You don't understand business. You don't really understand how the sport works. Just stay down there and buy. And if you like the product, then good. Rejoice. Rejoice that you love the product. But if you don't like the product, just don't buy it, but don't complain either. Don't complain because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Don't complain. Don't bitch. Don't moan. Don't throw a temper tantrum. Just stay down there. Stay down there. We're up here. You're down there. Know your role. Stay down there. And they pat your head, right? They just pat your head. And part of it is sort of this, there's been this, there's been two worlds colliding as smartphones have come along and people can get their content out there easily. And it used to be the boxing writers and big publications covered events, and then the boxing fans were over here. And other than 20, 30 of us who were putting out prediction and preview videos, nobody in the YouTube sphere covered the sport. And now that is flipped, right? And now we've seen some dudes in YouTube blow up and they're bigger than the writers. And there's sort of this beef that everybody sees, right? It's there. And I think that a lot of the writers have tried to distance themselves from the boxing fans who call themselves journalists. And that's another part of this. Another problem is you have boxing fans on YouTube who are clearly biased and they get access to certain fighters. And in order to keep access with these certain fighters, they have to say certain things. You see these dudes out there right now, right? They're saying things like Ryan Garcia versus Bud Crawford's a 50-50 fight. They're saying things like, oh, Bud Crawford's going to duck Ryan Garcia. You see these dudes out there, right? They're trying to warm up to Ryan Garcia and his audience because they know the boxing audience is so small that you can't make real money, fellas, writing and doing content for just hardcore boxing, American boxing fans, because 99% of them aren't here. Nando has talked about this in the chat. Shout out to Nando. that most people who go to fights, pull up to fights. My guy Christian my guy Christian goes to fights almost every weekend, and they comp him. They comp his hotel rooms. They comp him for the fights. And he says, I don't consume any of this. I'm sorry. I see your videos on Twitter. Shout out to you, but I'm not watching these podcasts. And that's 99% of the audience that actually goes to fights, fellas. So out of the 150,000 hardcore boxing fans left, and it's probably less than that at this point, because more continue to leave every week because of what we get. Most of them aren't consuming this content anyway. And I throw this out there because boxing fans are blamed for a lot of the ills in boxing, unfortunately, because we're the last people to blame for this nonsense. But I think a lot of people try to separate themselves from that tag of boxing fan, and I embrace it. I'm a boxing fan. I'm not a journalist, nor do I want to be. I don't want the pay cut. I'm a boxing fan. And I come here as a concerned citizen saying, this is what I think I have an ear to the streets. I think I talked to enough boxing fans to know this is what we want, and this is what we're seeing, and this is why we continue to leave, and maybe you should be listening to us. And then you have smug, arrogant people saying, stop complaining. Stop complaining. Don't do it. Stop the bitching. Stop the temper tantrums. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's not going to work anyway, so just stay down there. And you try to tell them, right? I shout out Adam's boxing show because he asked the question, what's a low ball offer at this point? And he's using Brian Norman Jr. as an example. And I think we all see who have been here long enough, right? I think Anando will tell you, I think people who have been around here long enough following boxing for decades will tell you, Brian Norman Jr., we can already see it. He's going to be another guy 10, 15 years from now that we'll be talking about, like a Peter Quillen, right? Guys who were talked out of meaningful fights that could have got them somewhere at some point, and they were safely handled like an ETF instead of a small business, assuming some risk. And more on that in a minute, because I got some things to say on that, just some observations. Since we're talking about business, and since we've been told as boxing fans that we're not capable of talking about the business of boxing, right? He's just another guy that's going to be another guy that, remember that guy Peter Quillen? Yeah, he's running a fleet of trucks now. Yeah, remember when he's going to be one of those things, right? And it's going to be the same with Brian Norman Jr. You can just see it from a mile away. But he's asking, what's a low ball offer at this point if 1.7 isn't enough? Because I don't know if you guys heard, they're doing, like I said, the Matt Damon algorithms and the hallway of Harvard, on Good Will Hunting. He's like this, he's like this, and he's like this, he's like this. And they get to the answer and they say, no, 1.7 is not enough because look at all the overhead. And this dude's got $900,000 worth of overhead on 1.7 million, fellas. $900,000 worth of overhead on 1.7 million, fellas. And guess who's going to pick that cost up? It's you, the boxing fan. And you're going to do it without complaining, by the way. If you dare complain about picking up the price of inflation due to overhead, etc., pay-per-views, it's you. Don't complain. Don't complain. Because, fellas, you want to see Tank Davis fight. You want to see him fight or not? Well, guess what? You got to pay for it. If you don't, then that's fine. Don't do it, but just don't complain. I was told the same thing a couple years ago when Deontay Wilder was fighting real-life Viking Robert Helenius, right? And he's about to fight real-life Viking Robert Helenius, and I see it's tagged as a pay-per-view for like $75. And I'm like, wait a second. You're trying to pitch Deontay Wilder versus real-life Viking Robert Helenius for $75? What is this? What in the world is this? Why would you do this? And then I got dudes coming at me. And I want you to notice the trigger words that are used to shut down conversation when they don't have anything. When they're losing debates or they just don't have anything to take up for their favorite fighter, their favorite promoter, or this whole It's Stockholm Syndrome too, this whole system that they're covering or writing about that for whatever reason they support or explain away. They'll use trigger words to try to shut down the conversation. It's usually racist, Hitler, David Duke, tiki torches, you know, the whole nine, right? But they'll either do that or they'll say, just don't buy it, broke boy, just don't buy it. Or it's, if it gets past that and you say, I'm not buying it, and I'm telling you why I'm not, well, stop complaining. Just don't complain. Stop bitching, moaning, and throwing temper tantrums. How many times have we talked about that? Me and D-Style, how people will use those things to shut down the conversation because they have nothing else. And for whatever reason, whether it be Stockholm Syndrome, being uneducated, not being high IQ enough to have these conversations, they use these things to shut down the conversation to support this system that has destroyed them. You now have, fellas, like the past quarter century, 90% of the market in America has walked out the door. Now you have 90% less people to write to do these Twitter spaces to do these YouTube channel lives to tap dance for super chats to do XXX OnlyFans to. You see that, right? But you're supporting and propping up this system and explaining it away that's got you with less of a market. And they'll go to this thing, well, yeah, you know what? But it's flourishing in other markets. It's flourishing elsewhere. Okay, so number one, why is it flourishing elsewhere and not here? Number one. Number two, why would you think that some dude in Japan is going to care to read your articles in America? Why would you think that in this booming Australian market that somebody's going to want to listen to a YouTube channel in America? They've got their own markets there. They've got their own content creators, and you're not going to fly over there because most of you are broke. You're not going to fly to Japan to cover a fight or Riyadh to cover a fight. But to answer Adam's Boxing Show's question, a lowball offer is whatever they say a lowball offer is. You don't need to see the number. They don't need to prove anything to you. A lowball offer is if Brian Norman Jr.'s team doesn't feel like they can beat Boots Ennis, then Boots Ennis can offer him $5 million. And if they say it's a lowball offer because they don't want to do the fight, it's a lowball offer. It's that simple. A lowball offer is whatever they say it is. And boxing writers, content creators who sympathize for whatever reason for this system will come out and explain why a dude being offered something 50 times, even if it's 5 million, 50 times his previous market value high, they'll still come out and explain why it's a good idea to turn that down and keep him safe for the next 3 or 4 years. They'll still explain it away. They'll explain away why it's acceptable for Tank Davis to fight a Rayo, and that's fine if you like Rayo and you think this is a good fight, but it's a B-level fight when there was an A-level fight there, and nobody is asking. None of the boxing writers are asking, as far as I can see, why in the hell is this dude not offering Shakur a fight? The dude was just a free agent. How does this dude keep getting away with this? How low are your standards at this point? Why are your standards so low of this dude? And I use Tank as the example because they say he's the face of boxing, but in a way he is the face of American boxing because he exemplifies right now. He is the face of keeping us safe, keeping them coddled, breastfeeding them, burping them for 12 years. Let's keep them safe in this bubble. Let's keep them safe. It's smart business to fight Rayo because he'll make some millions. And then, it's an easy fight and he'll be a 10-1 favorite. And why do that? He's going to win the fight anyway. He's going to win the fight anyway. It doesn't matter. He doesn't need to fight the fights. And we're not getting the fights. And if you raise an objection to this, you're just complaining and you need to shut up. Shut up. Stop throwing a temper tantrum because it doesn't matter. Anyway, you don't matter here. You don't matter. Just don't buy it. Go away. It's like, okay, I'll go away like everybody else is. When are you going to look around? Who's left? I tell this all the time, like me and D-Style walked in the door 10 years ago. We had 8 of us. doing work together, blogging together, vlogging together. And me and D-Style only once left. 6 of them walked out the door. And they'll look at me like I still talk to them all the time. You still do this? You still cover that sport over there? What are you doing over there? And it's not falling off a cliff either. What they don't understand is like it's an erosion. Me and D-Style were talking about that on the phone over the weekend. It's like it's never all right. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. This too much. This right here. This situation right here. If you can point to one instance where that was the case, it was the Mayweather-Pacquiao saga, right? And people said, oh, what, God, all that time to do this, all that time for that. And people walked out the door in droves. But generally is people just kind of walk away and they can't point to a single event that did it. It's just, they just lost interest and they just walked out the door and they took your advice, by the way. They just quietly walked out the door. They just kind of lost interest. Life got in the way as this boring, terrible product was right there. And they said, you know, why am I going to follow this boring, terrible product over here? And they just kind of meander and walk off. That's how it works. They took your advice and they just quietly walked off, and you're going to have like 17 people left in this country to write to a decade from now. So a lowball offer is whatever they say a lowball offer is, right? And I also want you to know that speaking of Mayweather versus Pacquiao, we should have said never again. And you should have had gatekeepers who were speaking up, writers, content creators who were speaking up, journalists in particular. The fact that, and this is what they don't realize either, fellas, the fact that we're getting louder, the ones who are left, the ones who haven't walked out yet, the reason we're getting louder is you're not doing your job. You're telling us things we already know. You got people bringing up Riyadh season and, you know, it's booming elsewhere and Riyadh season and, you know, you better be careful with Riyadh. We already know. You're telling us things we already know. You're writing things that we already talked about a year ago. I've already done multiple videos about what Riyadh season is. This isn't a boxing fan with a lot of money trying to save the sport. He's not trying to save the sport. It's a consolidation product. I had Jay Chaudhry on the show a month ago explaining you the 2030 vision. It's a consolidation product to make boxing, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the center of the boxing universe in 2030, by 2030. We've explained to you what it is. We already know what it is. And these boxing writers smugly come across and say, you don't understand the Riyadh season. We already know. Stop telling us things we already know. And how about you do some investigative journalism and focus on American boxing and why it's so terrible? We already know boxing is flourishing everywhere else. We need you to write articles about why it's flourishing elsewhere and why it sucks here. Dudes are just out here acting like this just happened. Like 90% of the audience the past 25 years just walked out the door because of football and basketball. And you have options here that you don't have elsewhere. And I've had UK dudes tell me that's cap. It's not true. We have options too. Soccer is the biggest sport in the world. We have other sports as well. Boxing isn't on the radar in the top 3. We have options too. It's a crutch that they keep rolling out. Constant crutches, constant excuses, explanations as to why we're failing here, as to why our standards are so low, and being surprised when fighters live up barely to these low expectations that we have of them. How about you write some articles about why it's flourishing elsewhere, why it sucks here? We already know about Riyadh season. We already know what 2030 vision is. We already know this stuff. We already understand the Japanese market and why it's flourishing there. I already told you that Riyadh season is a consolidation product and then eventually they're going to pull the rug. I've already told you about the positives, negatives of it. Right now, it's a net positive. Eventually, it becomes a net negative. I've already told you this stuff. I don't need writers to tell me this stuff. We already know. How about you do an article, do your actual job to where we don't have to bitch and moan and throw temper tantrums about how shitty American boxing is because you're not doing your job and calling it out. Stop explaining away why Tank continues to get B level, C level. This dude fought Rolando Romero. Did we forget that? How in the hell does a dude turn down 17 times his previous market value and this is explained away? And fellas, the business. Before I get to that, we should have said never again. Floyd versus Manny. They marinated for almost 6 years, 5 to 6 years, which was, I mean, just how that was allowed to happen. But it was, and it happened. And it ended up, those dudes, it was art, right? Those dudes went out there in front of 4.6 million households and laid a big old dump, diarrhea everywhere in front of the world. And Floyd openly bragged about robbing the bank. At that point, we should have said never again. Nah, we're not doing that again. Never again. But what happens? Same division. Welterweight division. Welterweight division. Historic division. Once great division. Thriving division. Sexy division. And what happens? Right after, we repeat the same exact thing. 5 years. Errol Spence, Bud Crawford at the top of the division. And what happens? They marinated again. Top 2 fighters in the weight class, they marinated again. Same weight class. That's over a decade of marinating the same weight class. You should have said never again the first time. Then you do it again. You do it again. And the same people are out here explaining away the same ills. And it gets worse. It gets worse. I'm sitting here minding my own business, September 2024, and this is after over a decade of marinating. Pacquiao, Mayweather, Errol, Bud. And these dudes are down the boots in us. And Brian Norman Jr., 2 dudes who, if they're walking at any mall in America, nobody knows who they are. They're going to be able to shop in peace. And they explain away how a dude turns down 17 times his previous market value because he has a belt and it's leverage. And you want to hold on to that leverage. You know, remember, we want to burp them, right? We want to burp. We want to burp them. And you don't understand. He could get knocked out in that. He could lose, guys. He could lose. And you don't want to lose that belt because that's all we have. What are we talking about here then? What is this still a sport? I don't understand because y'all are talking about this guy like he's great over here, but over here, he can't take 17 times his previous market value to fight this guy because number one, look at the overhead. He only makes 810 really, and then taxes after that. 810, guys. It's 810. It's really not 1.7. It's 810. Brian Norman Jr. is the first businessman ever to have to assume overhead and taxes. But we're all the way down to these 2 guys now. Same division, same mistakes. And I noticed something. And D-Style and I have talked about this. We talk about fighter safety. They only care about the safety of the top level fighters. And you can tell that by how they speak about fighter safety, how they write about fighter safety, how they talk about it, right? When it comes to fighter safety, they don't talk about poor Paco, from Guadalajara. I've talked about this, with 12 losses and 6 draws, and he's rolled out there to fight Torres Jr. or whoever it is, right? Abdullah Mason on the top rank undercard. And he's so much of an underdog that they can't even, fellas, they can't even price it on FanDuel. That's how much of an underdog he is. No props, nothing. That's how much of an underdog he is. And he gets rolled out there to get beat down in like 17 seconds. And the poor guy has his head dribbled into the 27th row. And everybody just forgets about poor Paco from Guadalajara. He just kind of walks out, and then everybody's celebrating like, oh my God, look how great this prospect is. And the poor dude has to walk to the locker room. And as he's walking to the locker room, he needs to grab his head from the 27th row and screw it back on. And nobody checks back on that dude a year from now. And he gets rolled out again for another prospect, and again for another prospect, and again for another prospect. And they dribble his head into the 27th row too. And once again, he's got to walk out, grab his head, 27th row, screw it back on. And nobody checks back on that dude 3 years from now when he's suffering from seizures and CTE, right? Because once again, it's writers missing the point in particular because they focus on the wrong things. The biggest threat to fighter safety is mismatches. It's not drug abuse. It's mismatches. You want a story? Just go on FanDuel right now and look. 50-1, 40-1, 30-1. Main events this weekend, 20-1. Undercard fights, 8-1, 12-1. And you look at that and you compare it to what you're getting in other sports, in particular the UFC, who, by the way, is a combat sport flourishing in this current market that they use as a crutch, right? They use this current market as an explanation, as excuse as to why boxing can't flourish in America, because it's got too much competition and, streaming. And then it's much different now than it was when Floyd was fighting. And they don't realize that every empire is destroyed from within. It's historic. It's biblical. And other sports are thriving within this market, even with piracy, etc. It's boxing killing itself in America. But what they're not focusing on, much like with fighter safety, is when they talk about business, they're talking about it from the prism of, and you saw it on the roundtable, right? They're happy for Rayo. Rayo's going to get his bag, and Rayo needs to get his bag. And good for Rayo, by the way. Good story, all that stuff. And I'm not mad at him for getting his bag, but why the hell am I not getting my fight? 1 versus 2. And they focus on it at the top level as fighters need to get their bags, but they're not focusing on the sport, the health of the sport as a whole. They're not focusing on the poor bastard who's sitting there at number 11 or number 17 or number 23 in the rankings, who can't get his shot because Mal Charlo has to hold on the belt for over 1,000 days because he has mental health. And they'll virtue signal and they'll parade around like they're pro fighter and let him hold on to the belt, as the poor bastard who is number 15 in the rankings, who is stuck there, who also has mental health. He's probably got child support, or he has to feed his family, and he has to lay sheetrock, lay drywall, and do boxing part-time because he can't make any money because the rankings are stagnated because these 2 dudes at the top refuse to fight each other. Our 1 versus 3 won't fight each other. And everybody is cheering these guys on at the top. Yeah, get your bag, get that smart, get your bag, low risk, high reward. It's smart, and they'll explain it away, right? Take your 4 easy fights, and beat up on some easy fighters that you're a 10-1 favorite against, because now we don't care about fighter safety all of a sudden. We did over here. Over here, we care about fighter safety, but over here, we don't. We don't care about fighters. Beat up on that 10-1 favorite. Beat up on that 12-1 underdog. Beat up on that 15-1 underdog. Take your 4 easy fights, Brian Norman Jr., and then guess what? You make that 1.7 in those 4 fights, and then you can come back and get $2 million after that. And they think this is smart business. They think that we're going to get emotionally invested in that. They think we're going to build an organic base, that Norman Jr. is going to build an organic base with people like us making moves like that. And they think that if this dude makes 1.7 over 4 fights, they're not taking time into account, right? Number one, they're also not taking into account that we like vulnerable fighters. So even if the dude loses the fight, we'll still like him. And maybe he'll become a star. And now he's going to fight on Keyshawn Davis's undercard, and they think that's smart. And they think that if he makes 1.7 million in 4 easy fights, that's a smarter move. And then maybe he'll get 2 million after that to fight Boots. And that'll be a smart move at that point. And they're taking these concrete numbers at the top and thinking that this is smart stuff. They're acting like Boots versus Norman Jr. is the end game, and it should be past that. These are historically fights we just made to see where they go, and then Norman Jr. could become a household name, and Boots could become a household name. And I don't feel empathetic towards Boots because Boots did the same thing. The dude was not fighting in Philadelphia for 6 years, and for 4 years, we've been on here telling the dude, this is stupid business. This is not smart business. You should not be loyal to Showtime, even though you don't have a contract to them. You should not be fighting as an independent contractor to PBC. You should not be fighting fights like this. You should not be making moves like this. It's constricting. You should be fighting in Philadelphia. Finally, he gets an adult in the room with him and Eddie Hearn. But he wasted all that time. Once again, time. Time. He wasted time. And now outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the 100,000, 125,000 hardcore boxing fans left in the sport in America, nobody cares who this dude is. He can't puncture the market. He spent all that time playing this game to where he can go to IBF route and I fight Bud, and he's told, stay down there. We'll take care of you on the back end. We'll take care of you on the back end. And we're telling them, you're not with smart business people. They don't have your best interests at heart. They're snake oil salesmen. They're running a scam. And he doesn't know they're running a scam at first. We finally hear that now he understands it, right? But he doesn't know at the time he's being taken advantage of, and he doesn't have people writing articles, doing content, educating him that he's in this pyramid scheme. And in this pyramid scheme, he cannot become a star. They don't have his best interests at heart. They're just taking investor money. They're treating every fight like it's going out of business sale, like Dana White said. And they're being paraded around like they're smart, intelligent businessmen. But we should have said never again after Floyd versus Manny. Every boxing writer in America should have said, well, we can't do this. We can't do this. That's not good. We can't do this. And it should have been picked up with Errol versus Bud. But once again, they started explaining away. Yeah, he's on that side. He's on that side. And you need to understand, these are still good fights we're doing. They're not the fights you want, but you know, if you don't like it, just don't buy it. But do not bitch. Do not complain. Don't throw temper tantrums. Don't do it. Do not do it. Don't do it. If you're not going to buy it, just shut up about it. You can only talk if you're going to talk positively about the sport. Don't talk negatively about the sport because that makes you a bad boxing fan, and it makes you anti-fighter. Go to hell. Go to hell. We're going to talk about what we want to talk about. I'm proudly a boxing fan. And that's how that's going to work. They're out of touch. They're so out of touch. And by the way, business. I just love when they bring up business because they know less about business than they do about the sport. And that's saying something. That's saying something because it sure as hell doesn't look like they know much about the sport. Sure as hell looks like that. But they know even less about business. It's hilarious to see them explain away moves like this when it's clear that it doesn't work. The fellas, the verdict is in. Marination does not work in America. It does not work. They're not capable of building any. They're not capable of building fighters. They're not capable of building fights. They're not capable of building stars. They're not capable of marinating. You had a promoter go on a YouTube. Did I mention this before? You had a promoter go on a YouTube channel and openly admit to marinating Plant versus Benavidez for 5 years. And the fight didn't even do 100,000 pay-per-view buys. Did I mention that? And they want to bring up business. Do you know how unimpressive American boxing power brokers are when it comes to business? Do you know how unimpressive this is? If I wanted advice on how to run a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme and just shake people down and get investors out of their money that you never, they're never going to get their money back, right? And just be a snake oil salesman at a high level and scale that. I would go to power brokers. I go to Samson, Luca, Wicca, and say, how do you scam people? How are you running this scam? I need to know. If I was a low value person who just wanted easy money to get out of people, right? Like you see these, no offense, but you see like these Baptist preachers who shake people down with their money and say, you are saved. That's Samson, Luca, Wicca, and his type. That's Al Heyman. That's these guys. But if I want advice on how to run a sustainable business, these are the last people I go to. Why would I go to advice for dudes who have run away 90% of the market in the last quarter century? But I have former boxing writers. There's just, and they never tell me, but I know who they're talking about. And they'll say, you don't understand these people, these boxing fans, they don't know how to run business, and they don't, they need to leave it in the hands. And you've had trainers, I talked about this. You had a trainer go on PBC's website during the whole Canelo signing extension with Munguia to PBC, and how PBC was geniuses because of this, and how boxing fans need to stay in their place and stop talking about just buy the fights. Just buy the fights, but don't talk about the business. Just talk about boxing fan stuff. And you can't even talk about strategy or anything because you don't know about that either. You got to leave that up to the trainers. You got to leave that up to the fighters. But sometimes I feel like I'm in the twilight zone because business, like fellas, I never want to do it, but was in multiple business meetings today, hour-long meeting with the CPA, because I plan on opening up 2 more businesses in 2025, and trying to figure out with my CPA, what's the smart thing to do? Do I keep businesses separate? How do I keep more money in the pension so I can keep it from Washington, DC, all this stuff, right? And what these dudes don't realize, because I see them bringing up small, like one of these former boxing writers bringing up small businesses on Twitter, on X, right? You don't understand that each one of these fighters is like a small business, and they just don't understand. You need to leave this up to the business guys in boxing. And I'm reading this, and I'm like, because this dude, how he's talking, and these people, how they talk, they've never run a successful small business. You know it. Because if they did, they would not be co-signing and explaining away this behavior. They would not be co-signing and explaining away these moves that don't make any sense. And the best way I can explain it, fellas, is like a Brian Norman Jr., just use him as an example, but you can use any American fighter, really. Benavidez, who was kept safe for years. Tank Davis, like any one of these fighters, you can, Stephen Fulton Jr., these fighters that were kept safe and kept in this bubble, right? American fighters. And you can contrast them to the Japanese fighters, which I'll talk about in a minute, because there's a reason that market is thriving. They know how to build. They know how to build fighters, fights, and they know how to build super fights. And they know how to make money that makes sense out there, that's sustainable. And that's why Japanese market will still be flourishing a decade from now, and why American boxing will continue to erode over time. It's never going to be a quick death. It's going to be just erode. And the best way I can explain it is like they're running these dudes' careers like ETFs or pension plans or 401ks. So where you get a 6 to 8% return over a 30, 40 year period. But these dudes don't have 30, 40 years. They don't have that. There's a short window where you can get money out of a fighter, and you're putting in, as a promoter, you're putting in probably a couple million before you see anything back with that fighter, right? And then the manager is the promoter, I'm sure the promoters want to put on this fight, fellas. It's the managers getting in the way. It's generally how it works. And these super safe managers, American managers, will keep their fighters safe and start running them like ETFs, 401ks. And any smart small business, successful small business person will tell you, those are the hedges. That's a hedge. That's stuff I do to keep my money in-house away from Washington, D.C., right? It's stuff I do to say, I can't touch that stuff for another 20 plus years, but I'll have it there for when maybe I can't work anymore and I want to retire, and that'll keep me safe until I die. That's the type of money we're talking about at that point. I wish, as a small business owner, multiple businesses, I wish that I could successfully create small businesses, build small businesses without assuming risk on the front end. But I can't separate that. Any successful small business owner will tell you you're assuming severe risk on the front end. Unfortunately, boxing is sort of a microcosm of American boxing, is a microcosm of America as a whole. And that's the point when I was on the spaces with Jules Ring IQ on Thursday night, is what he brought up. Really, each boxing scene is a microcosm of that country and that culture at this time. In American boxing, we're sort of going into territory that's going to be uncomfortable for people, but you're conditioned, you're psyoped by public school systems, etc., to play it safe, be an employee, and then get a 401k, and then 40, 50 years from now, you can retire and get in this rat race, build up mortgages, build up credit card debt. But there are people out there who want more than that. There are people out there who say, I'm going to assume this risk on the front end, knowing that I could fail and fall flat on my face and assume this debt. But if I get on the other end of that, boy, am I going to be in a great place. I want things. I want things for my family. I want to be greater than that. And when I look at the American boxing scene, I see these dudes running these dudes at this point in time when they should be assuming risk and saying, the spirit of competition is in me. I feel like I can beat Boots Ennis. I feel like I can destroy Boots Ennis. Give me the contract. 17 times. Great negotiating. It's time now. You got me 17 times my previous market value to fight a dude I know I can destroy. Bring him to me. Let's go. But when I look at these American fighters, I see that stripped of them. I see that energy gone. I see a market that's soulless. There's no soul there. When I read American writers, American boxing writers write, there's no soul there. When I read and have conversations with American boxing writers and some content creators who aren't boxing fans, and I listen to them, I'm like, no wonder AI is replacing you. Because there's no way I could tell the difference between you and a robot. It's soulless. There's no soul. And they're not understanding why boxing fans are not attracted to something that there's no risk involved. Why would I gravitate towards a risk-averse sport? When I'm surrounded by and having conversations with other people who I want to learn things from, to learn how to make more money, to have these conversations with hyper successful people, one thing they all have in common is none of them are risk averse. They're all willing to assume high levels of risk to get to the next level and the next level and the next level. And you can't separate that process. You can't. I would love to do that and take away the risk part of it on the front end. But to be honest, I don't at the same time, because if that was the case, everybody would be doing it. Everybody would be small business owners. Do you understand, fellas, the amount of regulation, the amount of taxes, the amount of money, the amount of loops we have to go through to run each business and run them each successfully. And we're doing it with everybody in our pockets. And we're assuming that risk. But at the same time, if you get on the other end of that, man, it's worth it. And it's hard to see this sport and see everybody be so risk averse. You don't recognize it. It's like, why would that guy not take 1.7 million to fight Boots Ennis? It's that part of it. But once again, it's like, why would you explain that away when it's bad for the whole sport? It's bad for the guy 17 in the rankings, 23 in the rankings, 21 in the rankings. These dudes only fight twice per year at most. So you want this guy to take 4 easy fights so he can get 1.7 million in 4 easy fights, as if he's going to get that, right? But even if he does, that's 2 years of his career. He's only 23. This is when fighters should be fighting legacy defining fights. Historically, they did. Why are you assuming that he has all the time in the world? And why are you assuming that he can get to Boots Ennis? Boots Ennis will probably be gone, and that's probably the point, right? He wants him gone. But you're assuming he'd get through 4 fights. Matias, they assumed that Matias would get through Liam Parrow. How'd that work? The dude lost a fight against Liam Parrow in his hometown, in his home country, in his homecoming fight. And this guy don't look like Matias. Y'all were calling Matias the boogeyman of the sport. And now Norman Jr. is the new one. And I'm sure he's going to fall flat on his face too. And part of it is y'all are advising him to take easy fights. So how in the hell is he going to get better? How do you get better doing easy things? And why, once again, would we be organically invested in this dude's career if it's so risk averse? Anything worth getting, fellas, is hard to get to. It's hard to get to. Y'all should feel that in the soul. And boxing writers are not going to tell you that, because once again, when you read their articles, they're mostly soulless. And they're explaining away this behavior. And they're not writing about what they should be writing about, right? They're writing post-fight wrap-ups as if we care about their post-fight wrap-ups and how the Saudis and the 20, as if we don't know about the Saudis already. This stuff has already been talked about. We have to talk about the stuff that y'all aren't talking about. And you're confused as to why we're getting loud about this. Can one of you speak about the ills of the American boxing scene? Can one of you sack up and say it's not healthy for the sport? It's not healthy for our American boxing scene for a dude to turn down 1.7 million when his previous high was 100,000. What in the hell are we doing here? You should expect more than Tank versus Ryo next, fellas. Come on. We're still here. You should expect more of a year from Tank in 2024 than Frank Martin and Ryo Valenzuela. Come on. What are we doing? Can one of you write an article about, hey, Tank was free and Shakur was a free agent? Is there a reason we didn't do that fight? Can you ask? Why we're not doing that? But they're not going to do it. Maybe they don't want to be doxxed. Maybe not. Maybe they don't want to be called racist like us. Grow a spine. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's gaslighting. It's exactly what it is. And HLD, I talked about this earlier. It's when they don't have anything, and I don't want to say they're purposely doing it. Sometimes it's just subconscious, and they've just been conditioned this way. I've talked about how boxing fans have been conditioned, a lot of them, and boxing writers have been conditioned. A lot of them are lapdogs, state-run media, right? There's part of that establishment, and they're going to tap dance for the credentials, right? But another part of it is some of them are good-natured. They just don't know. They just don't know. And they hear a boxing fan complain, and it's not even complaining, just raising this stuff shouldn't be like, this is common sense stuff. Tank versus Ryo, we should be getting a better fight. It's common sense. And Brian Norman Jr. shouldn't be turning down 17 times his previous market value. That's common sense. And it's also common sense if I can't explain my position, one, because I'm told to stop complaining, and number two, because the conversation is then shut down with, The trigger words, right? Stop complaining. Stop bitching, stop moaning, stop throwing temper tantrums. And the other part of it is the other trigger words that I've heard in the past from usually the Twitter Spaces guys, but some guys here on YouTube that you're racist and all this stuff, right? It's when they don't have anything, HLD. There's no substance to their arguments, and they're not used. They're not used to having conversations with boxing fans, I think is what it is. They're probably putting their pinkies up, right? And they're probably, some of them may have wined and dined with power brokers in America, and they're just so in awe of these guys. They're so in awe, like, I can't believe I just had dinner or lunch with this guy. And they're at their BWAA circle jerks, right? And they're all giving each other awards, and they're all there and celebrating how 90% of the market has walked out the door the past 25 years. It's funny because I'm just imagining the scene of the Boxing Writers Association of America, and they're just out there celebrating. Dude, if the American market is this bad, the hell is there to celebrate? But from where I'm sitting, nobody deserves an award. But how could you be in awe of clear snake oil salesmen? And why should I be taking business advice from people and be in awe of business people who are clearly just scamming the market? It's a Ponzi scheme. If you have this much of the market leave, and the sport is still operating to where fighters are still getting paid at the top, because we talked about how middle level, bottom level, they're not. And that's how I know these writers and these trainers who write these articles, right? These participants, I can tell they don't mean what they say, because if they did, they'd focus on mid-level fighters, bottom-level fighters, right? But how could you be in awe of it? It's clearly a scam, and I could tell you how it's a scam. If this many of the consumers have left, then the business, you shouldn't be making money, but they're still making money, the power brokers. And the fighters at the top are making more money than ever. So what that tells you is they're running a pyramid scheme. You understand that, right? Y'all understand that, right? I've tried to explain that before. Is this is a scheme to separate investors, networks from their money and just piss it away. And you get your money. Dana White has tried to explain this. He's tried to explain why business is going down the toilet in the boxing world, how boxing has gone down the toilet in America. So they treat every fight like a going out of business sale. They over marinate. They keep fighters safe, and nobody's going to be drawn to that. And that's why, it doesn't work organically. It's not an organic business. It's an artificial business. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. These dudes are corrupt. And a lot of writers apparently have been corrupted. Whether they know it or not, they've been corrupted. They've been psyoped, or they're in on it. But the people at the top, the fighters at the top, the people running these scams are making more money than ever. They're doing great. But people have left. And fighters, the mid-level, bottom level, and I talked about the poor guy who's 11 or 13 in the rankings, and he has to do boxing part-time because he has to lay sheetrock full-time because he can't make the money, right? Just think, fellas, nobody ever thinks about this. Just think of the dozens of fighters who, as Mayweather and Pacquiao don't fight each other at the top, as Errol and Bud don't fight each other at the top, as Boots and Norman Jr. don't fight each other at the top, as Maul keeps his belt for 1,000 days without fighting, and Adames holds on happily to his interim belt because we're told, right? They need to hold on to those belts because it's all they have. Hold on to those belts, guys. It's all you have. The standards are so low, right? They don't trust these fighters to keep their belts. And we have to be sympathetic, fellas, to these fighters who are multimillionaires, and they've already made their money at the expense of fighters who haven't made their money yet. And poor dudes are out there laying brick, working in the heat all day, and then going to the gym for 3 hours at night, jumping rope, hitting the bag, sparring, and their family doesn't see them walk in the door for 16 hours a day. and they never get their shot. Dozens of fighters who just never get their shot because these rankings are stagnated at the top. And once again, they're not going to write about that. They're going to write about this dude from Saudi Arabia trying to consolidate the sport and bring it back and how that's bad and blood oil and all that stuff, right? And they're going to talk about flourishing markets elsewhere, but they're not going to do the math in their head and say, wait a second, why are markets flourishing elsewhere and not here? Why is that happening? They're not going to do that math in their head. They're, like I said, they're going to blame outside factors. Yeah, but it's football. And then it's basketball. Then it's baseball. And then we have more options here. And then they don't have options there because, they just don't have options. They don't have options here that we have in America. That's not it. It's part of it, but it's only part of it. It's a smaller part than they think. And how I know that is UFC is thriving, and that's a combat sport. And it's thriving even with football, basketball, baseball there. And by the way, these other sports are thriving even with piracy because they'll blame piracy too. They can't get their heads out their asses. And they can't get themselves to blame this market. Inoue is out there. Inoue. And he's saying, I see you, Junto. I see you at 118. I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I see you making your move. I see you on pound for pound list. Now, I see what you're doing. You're one division away. You know what I want you to do? I want you to fight my brother Takuma. You're going to fight him, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to fight him, and he's my brother. So he's going to take that fight because the spirit of competition, that's what we do here. Notice, Inoue goes to 122. And what's he do? He consolidates all the belts in 2 fights. If this was an American fighter, what would have happened, fellas? What would have happened? We'd have had, your side of the street, my side of the street. So I'll fight this belt for over here, and then you fight, you keep those belts over there, and then we're going to marinate this. I'll do 3 easy fights. You do 3 easy fights. We'll do 4 easy fights. And then you'll have journalists or easy to please boxing fans say this is an A+ year in American boxing, right? It's A+. They're giving A+. Last year was great too. A+. Can't get their heads out their asses, right? Felt like I was in the Twilight Zone on the last round table, by the way. I'll just throw that out there. But they're capable of marinating fights there because they fight the fights and they build them through the fights. I got bad news for American fighters who look at Jake Paul and look at Ryan Garcia and say, we can do that too. We can do that too. We can go around the fire instead of through it and become stars. And what they don't realize is Jake Paul and Ryan Garcia were superstars before they even laced up professional gloves. Boxing is almost a side hustle to them. Even Ryan Garcia, they make so much money without boxing. And they had a market there before that they built up. They're anomalies. They are the exception to the rule. And you are not the exception. You are the rule. And the rule says you have to fight the fights to get there. If we're talking about small businesses, and I can tell these writers have never run small businesses, in particular successful ones, you can't separate. You cannot separate the severe risk on the front end. We all hope we get a return on investment on our initial investment within the business within the first couple of years. We hope we do. But you can't separate the risk. And if you try to, the market is not going to be attached to what you're doing. And what they're doing out in Japan is 118. I'm 122. I ran through 122 quick. Yeah, I'll fight Sam Goodman. I'll fight MJ Akhmadalov. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of them. I want you to take care. If you beat my brother, guess what? Now we got a super fight in the Tokyo Dome. I trust you to get through 118. I'm going to get through 122. If my brother beats you, good. Even better for me. Keep it in the family. But they know how to build. And they build super fights through fights, not through rumorville. Ring IQ has done a great job of explaining this. It's almost like shade room stuff, right? It's they build fights through rumorville here. And we're just not attacked. We don't care. They see these dudes on the boxing voice. They see this dude, fire sticks outside, fire sticks to outside, fellas. And Ryan Garcia, yeah, Bud Crawford's ducking Ryan Garcia now. Oh my God, did you see what Ryan Garcia said about? But we don't care. And they see these clicks and these views and these dudes who are getting the clicks and the views. These dudes who are clicking on this stuff are not buying the fights. And how do we know this? Because some of these videos are getting more traction than the actual fights when they fight. But they know how to build over there. And one thing people don't realize, when you sell, I think any good salesman will know this. And I'm sure, like, if some of you are salesmen, you probably heard this. The people you're selling to and are trying to separate them, you're trying to separate them from their money, right? And get it over there to over here. And not everything has to be transactional. And really, you shouldn't treat it as transactional, because they'll sniff it out and they'll see you as a transactional person, and they just want organic relationships, right? But what they want at the end of the day is, it's not complicated. In the American boxing market, they do it the opposite. They'll try to get you to understand their point of view. And this is my frustration with boxing writers that just keeps growing. And I think you're starting to see my frustration with it. And it's starting to boil over. And part of the reason, I just don't understand it. They've been psyoped to talk this way. The power brokers constantly try to get you to see things from their point of view. You got to see it from my point of view. If you want to see Deontay Wilder fight, you got to see him fight against the real life Viking Robert Helenius, and you got to pay $75, or you just won't see him fight. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, who the hell created that model? Where did that come from? And they'll try to brainwash you into think there's not pay-per-view value fights. And then I was told it again last week. Do you want to see Tank fight? If you want to see Tank fight, and they sign the contract, then you got to buy the fight. I'm saying, wait a second. I got to pay $80 to see him fight Rayo Valenzuela, or not see him fight. That's my two choices. I don't get better choices. You need to stop bitching. You need to stop complaining. It's not going to work. Who do you think you are? A boxing writer? Stay down there. You'll pat your head, right? Stay down there. Don't complain. They want you to understand it from their point of view. They don't care about your point of view. They want you to understand them. But in reality, when you're selling to people, the people that you're selling to want to know that they're understood. And if they know you understand them, they will buy from you. They flipped it. And it's not surprising why they have to run a pyramid scheme. Everything is inverse in American boxing. Everything is ass backwards. Everything is upside down. It's you have to understand them and their point of view at the expense of yours. You have to look out and understand their interests and what's better for them at the expense of your interests. And your interests don't matter, and you need to stop bitching. Do not throw your temper tantrum. Stop bitching. We don't care about your point of view. We don't care if you're understood. You're nothing here. You don't have a seat at this table. You just buy. I've seen the articles pinned by trainers on PBC website. Your job is not this. Your job is just to buy. Either buy or shut up. That's your two options. Buy or don't buy. And if you don't buy, like I said, only speak if it's positive. If it's negative, don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't buy and stay silent. And then they'll blame piracy, right? This is another part of it. They don't understand that the black market exists in the way it does for a certain reason. Other sports are thriving even with piracy. These dudes are acting like people don't pirate NFL Network, NFL Sunday Pass, Sunday Ticket, whatever it's called, NBA Free Pass, whatever it's called, MLB, whatever it's called. People are pirating those things, fellas, but they're still thriving. People are even pirating college football as cheap as it is, and it's still thriving. UFC still thriving even with all the piracy. Boxing is not. And they're not putting that together. And what they're not realizing is there's almost this black market system going on right now. And it really irks me. It's another one. It's another one that really irks me because people will blame the boxing fans and pirating for the ills of the sport. And they don't realize that the ills of the sport were there before the pirating. And a pirating has become sort of a tool, sort of a sword that the boxing fan has picked up to fight this battle with the power broker. Now say, you know what? You turn this into a country club sport. This was a poor man's sport. It was built on a poor man's back. And we used to be able to bring our sons. You used to be able to go to fights and see 3 generations of boxing fan. You used to be able to see the grandpa, and then he passed it on to his son, the dad, and then he passed it on to the grandson. And you used to see stuff like that, and it was wholesome. And you see the transition, and you see the torch being passed, right? And this is going to rub people the wrong way. One person in particular who's in the chat right now, but Saturday is prime example of this. The consumer's priced out. Priced out. Everybody knows the tune-up fight Saturday night. Everybody knows. And look, man, I don't give a damn. We've been here 3+ years. Take it however you want to take it. Take it however you want to take it. Because if it comes down to this, fellas, and y'all are mad about me as even as I've called it, as much as I've taken up for Canelo's side against his stupid haters and detractors who I still don't like. If this is what it comes down to where y'all are going to leave because I have an opinion on a Berlanga fight, go to hell. Take it. Go. I don't care anymore. He priced a lot of his fans out. There's an acceptable way to do Canelo versus Berlanga. Because this is a prime example of it, of greed. And I get it up to a certain point because Canelo has said, look, man, I've carried this sport. I've made a ton of concessions. And what I love about Canelo is I was talking about small businesses earlier and assuming risk on the front end. Canelo did that and he got it back on the back end. And now he's getting it even more. And it's good. I'm happy about that. But you don't do Canelo versus Berlanga for $89.99 in Vegas. You don't do it. Go to hell. And if you like it, if you're going out there, subjective, good for you. Do it. I'm not going to rain on your parade, but I'm going to give my opinion on it. You don't do it. And it's an example of gouging the market. It's an example of pricing the market out, not listening to fans. I know it's going to rub some people the wrong way, but so be it. I'm not understanding the mentality. I don't understand it. I don't understand why boxing fans will speak out against their own interests because boxing writers will tell them to and power brokers will tell them to, and you start sounding like them. I don't need to understand their position, and I don't need you to explain to me their position. I need you to write meaningful things. I don't need you to explain to me the 2030 vision because I've already seen plenty of stuff on that. I brought Jay Chaudhry on the show, and we tried to explain it to you before then, fellas. Look, speaking of Jay Chaudhry, I saw Jay Chaudhry in 2019, 2020 explain to you that Showtime Boxing is in danger when Paramount when Paramount streaming comes into play 2023, 2024. He's explaining this 4 or 5 years ago. And he's saying there are certain metrics that they need to hit. And if they don't hit these metrics, they're gone. And that goes for any Showtime content. And Paramount picks up other Showtime content, but they don't pick up Showtime boxing. And you'll have boxing writers explain it away as this stuff just happens. It's just a new market. And you know, you understand streaming, and then Paramount just didn't want to pick things up. And no, they had certain metrics they had to meet. Certain metrics that they had to meet. And they're telling them ahead of time, these are the metrics. We do not go. Dude, this is dinosaur stuff. We do not go with Nielsen ratings. We don't pay attention to Nielsen ratings. Who the hell pays attention to Nielsen ratings these days? And they're still out there citing Nielsen ratings and $20 million live gates and 1.2 million pay-per-views. For the love of God, man. Y'all believe in that? And they're trying to explain to you that if they don't meet these metrics, then we can't keep it. We'd be bleeding. And they don't pick them up. So that tells you Showtime boxing was a failure. It wasn't kept by Paramount because it was a failure. I need boxing writers to write articles like that. I don't need boxing writers to tell me things I already know. And I certainly don't need boxing writers writing articles explaining the power broker position. I need boxing writers to start writing things that are favorable to boxing fans. Why don't you speak from our point of view every once in a while? We already know what they're saying. We already know what they're thinking. They tell us, I don't need you writing about it. Do something meaningful. Or else you're going to be, dude, you're going to be replaced by an AI robot and nobody's going to even notice. You can replace 99% of boxing writers in America with an AI robot and just put their name at the bottom. Nobody's going to notice because their articles are soulless. There's no soul. You need to understand as a boxing fan that you're in this alone. You're out here alone. You don't have a voice. You don't have anybody to speak up for you. And that's just how it is right now. And they flipped it. They've inversed it. And they're not about trying to understand you. And that's why you need to be louder, by the way. Because, like I said, the writers aren't going to write about it. These big content creators are not going to do it. I see these dudes, man. I don't want to name names, but you see them out there, the ones that are talking about Bud Crawford's ducking Ryan Garcia, right? And stuff like that. And the ones who conquer and divide and get people riled up, and this guy's ducking that guy. We know those content creators, but the big content creators, the big YouTube guys, the big TikTok guys, they're not going to do it for you. And on top of that, the boxing writers are not going to do it for you. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it for whatever reason. They're just soulless, fellas. They can't do it. They're not capable. So you're going to have to do it on your own if you're still out here, if you plan on sticking around, and don't let them bully you into not giving your opinion. If you want to talk about the ills of the sport, go ahead and do it, because they're certainly not going to write about the ills of American boxing. They're not. They're not going to do it for whatever reason. I don't know if they've been psyoped. I don't know if they're part of that establishment, or they're just a lot of them fellas, they just want to be liked. They're too scared. They're too scared to do it. But they flip that. Any good salesman knows the consumer wants to be understood. They'll see you pop up with the business and say, I've been waiting for this. There's been a vacuum for this. There's been a market for this. Thank you for opening this business right here. And then you develop that relationship organically with them because you understand them. You understand why they're here, because they wanted this business to be here. You understood why the business was there because you listened to the market. You knew there was a vacuum for it. Nobody running an organic business that's sustainable has people show up and say, I don't really like what you're doing. Yeah, but you need to understand it from my point of view. No, they don't want to hear that. I wouldn't even waste my breath with that because who the hell would care? They're just going to walk out. They don't even pretend anymore. And they're openly telling you to shut up. Only speak if you have something positive to say. If you're not going to buy the product, shut up. Stop bitching about it. They're openly telling you now. They've been telling us for a while. And you hear more and more and more of it. They're getting bolder with it. Salute to you, Remy. I appreciate you. And I'll say this too. And I hope y'all enjoying this full high definition 1080 today. Teeth look good. Man, the teeth look good. This isn't the 720, Remy. I know you're used to the 720, but now you got the 1080. You got the 1080 now, Remy. You got the 1080. See more grays in the beard, but it's all right. You got the 1080. But I'll tell you this too, man. Like, people will tell us things about having Glenn on and big up in Tim Tszyu. The reason, fellas, I guarantee you I don't get anything from the Tim Tszyu team for doing this stuff. Like, nobody's giving me, I don't care. The reason is because you see something that, you see all of this foolishness, and then you see a team that's operating, and you're like, hey, this is how it should be. This makes sense. I see the Japanese market. It's like, yeah, I see why it's thriving. It makes sense. I see why the Australian market's thriving. It makes sense. UK, it makes sense. It resembles a sport. And then they'll make excuses as to why the US market's not thriving. And it's like, duh, it doesn't make any sense is why it's not thriving. Yeah, but you don't understand the more options, and you don't understand if you want to see your favorite fighter fight, you got to fork over. It's like, go to hell. No. But Tim Tszyu, he fights Fundora, and then he wanted to fight Virgil. They wouldn't let him. They wouldn't clear him. And now he's going to fight Murtaziliev for a belt. He's right back where he was, even after a loss, and nobody abandoned him. And then after that, he wants to fight a month and a half later. And then he wants to fight in the spring. And probably a unification fight. It's like, okay, why in the hell wouldn't I get behind that? They seem confused as to, another thing I got to give Ring IQ credit for. Why do you seem confused as to why American boxing fans are starting to flock to the foreign markets? Why do you seem confused as to why we're Inoue fans and Tim Tszyu fans and Anthony Joshua fans? These guys assumed risk on the early parts of their career. And if they get past that, then they're going to reap rewards. They're going to be stars. Cannot. Roberto Diaz has told D-Style, I didn't want him to fight the Trout fight. I didn't want him to fight the Mayweather fight. I didn't want him to fight the Lara fight. We were trying to talk about all these fights. He fought the fights. So there's that part of me, fellas. Even though I don't like this Berlanga fight, I'm a Canelo fan. Full-blown Canelo fan. Me not liking the Berlanga fight, fellas, that doesn't take away from that. As much as y'all try to take that away from me, I'm a full-blown Canelo fan. Because of the moves the dude made early on that paid off after, it's not hard to figure out. Unless you're the exceptions to the rule, Jake Paul, Ryan Garcia, you got to go through the fire. Canelo understood that. And Canelo, it wasn't even about that. Canelo just, he's a competitor. We flock to competitors. Kobe, Jordan, Derek Jeter, all these guys, they want to compete. Tom Brady, they want to compete. They see up here and they're like, yeah, I understand. I get it. I get it. You're telling me I can't win this fight? You're telling me I can't win? They might not be openly telling me, but they're telling me not to fight this fight. So what that tells me is they don't think I can win the fight. What I'm telling you is I'm going to win the fight. What I'm telling you is go make the Austin Trout fight on 6 weeks' notice for half the money. I'm going to fight the fight. Go make the Mayweather fight, even if I lose. Watch this. I'll fight Lara next. Be bigger than ever. And he does it. And you contrast that to Brian Norman Jr. Turning down 17 times his previous market value because overhead and post-tax, pre-tax, and you're like, what? 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 Why in the hell would I be invested emotionally in that? And y'all are going to be confused 5 years from now when the dude is not a star and nobody cares about him like Boots Ennis right now. It should not be surprising to you. Why is it surprising? It should not be surprising why we're flocking as American boxing fans toward foreign-born fighters. And it should not be surprising to you why a Mexican fighter is the biggest fighter in America. Tank is the face of what American boxing is, but he's not the face of American boxing. Canelo is. Even with the Berlanga fight, even with the, his pay-per-views are going, he's still the face of American boxing. And that tells you how bad American boxing currently is, that nobody has been able to supersede him. Nobody's been able to take that from him, even as his market value within the boxing world, because his endorsements are bigger than ever. He's bigger than ever outside of the boxing space, but within the boxing space, the pay-per-view numbers are going down, the live gates are going down, but still, he's clearly the face of American boxing and boxing as a whole. But Inoue in Japan is the face. In the UK, Anthony Joshua is the face. In America, Canelo is the face. But the face of American elitism, the face of American privilege, the face of American pamperism, the face of American, what American boxing is, like the stink of it, that stench, that's Tank. That's Tank. And once again, people are going to have a problem with that, but go to hell. The face of that nastiness, that smell, that sewage smell that you smell coming from American boxing, Tank's the face of that. But one thing I know is you better not. Look, if you don't like Tank versus Ryo, just don't buy it, but you better not bitch about it. Do not bitch about it. Don't do it. Do not give your opinion on it. Leave a 1 star on the Yelp. Don't write anything under that 1 star. Don't do it. Do not do it. You're just an American boxer. You're just a boxing fan. Stay down there. I'm supposed to buy from these people? I'm supposed to read these articles? Andre Rodriguez, $5.99 super chat. Good boxing writers have only an underground platform today, Calix. I know it from the inside for quite a few years now. And when I was on this space with Jules Thursday night on Ring IQ on his Twitter, it's another point he's brought up that I brought up before. You really have to be decentralized from the scene. Look, man, shout out Steve Kim, because I think he's the best at this. I think he's the best at, and people can think whatever they want about him. It doesn't matter to me. Consider him a friend, good dude. I know his values. The thing that he's the best at in the boxing space, at least from where I'm sitting, he's the best at this. He's the best at being in the scene and still giving his opinion. I've seen it in person, by the way. I've seen him tell people straight up, you shouldn't be doing that. Why'd you do that? Why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing it. I've seen him tell people straight up when we're at bars hanging out, he'll tell the power brokers or even fighters, why this? Why are you doing this? That's not a smart thing to do. And he's the best at just giving his opinion. And that's it. And we need more people like that. And it takes, I learned this a long time ago. The best superpower that you could have is just not caring about what people think about you. And I don't think anybody ever masters that, by the way. I'm still working on it. Because there's always going to be that part of you that does care about it. But He's the best at that. And you don't have, if any, other boxing writers who will do that. And they're too in the scene to give an uncorrupted opinion on things. And you're starting to see that more and more. And, we saw examples of that last week. They're going to take the opinion of the brokers. They're going to take the opinion in the sport. They're going to take the opinion of maybe the sanctioning body. They're going to take the opinion of the fighter at the top, not the fighters at the mid level, bottom level, the fighters at the top. They're going to take and explain away why they're doing things they're doing. And I know I'm sort of just streaming tonight. There's been more about my frustrations than actual fights, and we'll get back to that tomorrow, right? It's just been stuff that's been bothering me as a boxing fan for a while, and I'll use my platform to rant and get this stuff off my chest. But what Jules was saying is you really have to go to boxing fans to get a good, unadulterated opinion now. Boxing fans on YouTube, wherever they are, boxing fans on Twitter. And of course, there's the weirdos. Of course, there's the ones with the terrible takes. But if you find those boxing fans who just call it down the middle and give their opinion on things, man, you need to hold on to that. And I'm not saying it has to be me, wherever you want to go. If you think I'm a wacko, wherever you want to go, if you find that channel, you stick to it, because that's where you're going to get the best opinions on it. You can't go to former fighters, fellas. I know some of you have reached out to me about Andre Ward's new podcast, and you shouldn't be surprised by that, fellas. You shouldn't be surprised by the content you're getting there. And what I would tell you is mostly with fighters, former fighters with podcasts and content, you go there when they're breaking down fights, jab versus straight right, stuff like that, right? Body shots, counter punching, like stuff like that, fight breakdowns. But you do not go there. You do not go there for this guy needs to fight that guy. You don't go there for that. They're not capable. And then same with boxing writers. I mean, you see some of these guys right now, and they do it with the PBC in particular. And there's a couple that come to mind. I'm not going to name them, but they're out there saying Al Heyman's back. It says Al Heyman's back, boy. You're going to get some great PBC content in the fourth quarter. And man, and it shouldn't be surprising to you how you see some of these guys, you watch a pay-per-view and you see these guys pop up. You're like, man, I wonder how he got that job. You're watching a pay-per-view and you'll see their opinions on things and you're like, that's a weird opinion. It should be pretty clear to him how this went and why that's happening, but he still seems to be giving a rosy picture of this from the power broker's point of view. It certainly looks like state-run media here, but I'll give him the benefit to see him pop up on a pay-per-view or with a microphone on Amazon or DAZN. You're like, oh, I see what it is. And part of it too, fellas, is this is the part I feel empathetic of for people who cover the sport, is they do need money. And if it's a business for them and they depend on it, you do feel bad, because a lot of them are replaceable, AI in particular, etc. So you do feel bad and you feel empathetic. But, it used to be USA Today, ESPN, New York Times. These people used to cover fights, and they were too big for a Bob Arum or Don King to say, USA Today, don't come to our fight. Don't come to our fight. ESPN, don't come to our fight. It's not going to happen. They were too big, right? So they were able to give their opinion on what they saw and still be in the room asking questions the next fight. You knew you had to deal with them. Now these dudes are so replaceable. They're depending on AdSense, etc. They're too scared to give that opinion that they need to give. They're too replaceable to speak out. But that's the sad part about it, is if they do speak out and put out meaningful content that's evergreen, they do some investigative journalism, if they explain certain things as to the ills of the sport, maybe, just maybe, they'll get their readership up. And maybe, just maybe, they'll become irreplaceable. I don't know. It is, I think. I'll get confirmation on that, Nando. But I think, and from what I understand, Tim Tszyu has become a full blown pay per view fighter out there, and the pay per views, the prices out there are seen as acceptable by the Australian market. To them, it makes sense. I'm not educated enough to speak on the Australian market, but from what I understand, the Australian market is happy with what they're seeing from Tim Tszyu. I would assume it's free here and paid for pay per view out there, but I do not know. I do not know that for sure. Um, so that's it. I just know that in these other markets, for them, because I talked to them, I talked to the UK guys, and they seem much more intelligent than the American guys. I talked to the dudes who put out content, the boxing fans out there from the UK. I see the Japanese market. I talked to some of these dudes like Lyndon from out in Australia. You see them on the round table, and to them, their market is thriving and it makes sense, and they're happy. And they know full well, by the way, that when their fighters come to the American market, that there's going to be stagnation. They understand it. They don't understand how we operate. They understand our stagnation. They understand the stuff that they're going to have to deal with when they come over here. And that's that. I went longer than I thought today, and I certainly didn't want to make it seem like I was complaining. But fellas, today was just me voicing opinions and offloading things that have been on my chest. And it's going to be more balanced going forward as far as sport and business side of things and all that stuff. It's just, I'm a very positive person. I'm going to try to stay positive about boxing. But this is the one thing that I like, that I see, and I like, I don't really have a positive outlook on this. To me, I'm an eternal optimist. My wife sees some of these videos I do, and she's like, where did that come from? You're a happy person. What is this? I want the sport from top to bottom to make sense. I want these fighters that we run into, and they're like, man, I just can't get a shot. I'm working so hard. I feel like I deserve this. I just can't get a shot. And it kills me. It kills me when you see fighters at the top take that for granted. And they went through the process too, but somewhere, and I've talked about how from the amateurs to the prospect to the contender to the champion level, something's broken there. And the amateurs, we're obviously not living up to our expectations. And medal count, I don't really look at medal count for the amateurs as an end all be all as far as measurement for success, because a lot of these guys are competing against fighters who are pushing 30. Some of them even, almost eternal amateurs. But we are producing good talent still from the amateur ranks to the pros. These guys aren't known by the time they get to the pros like they were back in the day coming out of the Olympics. And on top of that, still we're not producing the amount of talent that we should be coming out the amateur system. The amateur system, clearly there's something wrong with it. But I think more so there's something broken from the prospect to the contender level, and then contender level to champion level. And now you get guys being emailed belts at 23 years old who want to hold on to it for dear life. And that's how you know the system is broken. And it's being explained away. That's how you know the system is broken, because we still need movement. We still need these poor gentlemen and ladies, because we talk to them too, who aren't getting opportunities because there's stagnation at the top, and we don't have the time to waste anymore. Once again, I bring up the word time. We don't have the time to waste anymore. These fighters are fighting twice per year, sometimes once per year. We don't have the time. The windows are closing. And fighters just get stuck. And then some of them just give up and walk out the door. Talented fighters just walking out the door. because they just feel like they're never going to get their shot. Nobody cares about those dudes. And then it bothers me when you have these virtue signalers, are the people who their head's just in their ass, they just don't know, who will explain a way that you need to understand these fighters, and you need to understand these fighters at the top and how they need to stay safe and all this stuff. And they'll act like they're the ones who are pro fighter. You're not pro fighter. You're pro A-side fighter. You don't care about the dude getting his head knocked into the 27th row, like I said, because Brian Norman Jr., in order to stay safe, has to fight an 8-1 underdog. And then maybe next he's going to fight a 12-1 underdog because he has to stay safe and keep his belt. What happened to fighter safety? What happened? And how is that smart business? Well, you know what I'll be doing, fellas, by the way? On November 8th, I think it is. You know who I'm not watching that night? Brian Norman Jr. That fight can go to hell. Was he fighting this guy Cuevas, whatever his name is? That fight can go to hell. And I'm not going to watch it. And guess what? I'm also going to complain about it. And I'm going to tell you why I'm not watching it. Because why would I be emotionally invested in a risk-averse fighter who is turning down 17 times his previous market value because he has overhead and taxes? And oh, by the way, he's going to have overhead and taxes for the Cuevas fight. I'm not going to be watching it. Go to hell. October 12th. You know what I'm watching? Bivol Better Be free with my ESPN Plus subscription. You know what I'm not watching? Shakur Stevenson against Joe Cordina. I don't care what it is. You can price that fight. You can pay me $14.99 for it. Not watching it. Bob Arum, whoever. What's his name? Turkey Al-Sheikh, whatever his name is. He can come to my house, try to hold my hand, and personally try to deliver me $14.99 to watch Shakur Stevenson in the main event. I'm going to slap his hand away and say, no, I'm not watching this dude fight Joe Cordina and paying actual money, actual real life USD to watch Shakur Stevenson on a main event against Joe Cordina. No, not doing it. And also, while I'm not doing it, I'm going to be complaining about it. So just fair warning, heads up. God bless. Peace.